Jim, know you didn't stand in the last general election. I'd like to maybe come back to you before the end of the summer to do a more comprehensive interview, maybe ask Gaeilge about your time as a TD and a minister and about what you enjoyed and learned most about the jobs. We have a lot to get through today, though, and we have less than a half an hour, so I will move on. Okay, leading us up to talk about the strategy sharing division launch recently, I understand that you were in Castlerea and Roscommon recently. I know that part of the country fairly well, and I heard you speak on Drive Time and RT Radio 1 about this yesterday as well. Can you tell our listeners a bit more about what is this news regarding youth mental health services in that part of the country and indeed nationally?
Yeah, what has been established in Castlerea is a CAMS Connect. It's what we refer to really as a tele-hub, and that is basically something that allows either psychiatry or indeed psychology, or facilitates that allows psychiatry and psychology and indeed any talking therapies to be, if you like, delivered online to anywhere in the country from a centralised hub. So we have a difficulty across Ireland at the moment with having a sufficient number of consultant psychiatrists who provide clinical governance to teams that work with young people, to teams that work with adults. They provide clinical governance and psychiatry to patients in inpatient units. But we have different gaps in the system where we don't have a consultant psychiatrist. We're not alone in that particular challenge. If you look across the country, across the world, across the globe, many countries are experiencing similar shortages of consultant psychiatry. What they're doing there is enhancing their existing service with online delivery. So to put it into practice for you, to give you a practical example, I could be a parent of a 17-year-old, 18-year-old, 19-year-old presenting into A&E at 2 a.m. with a very disturbing episode of psychosis. Which is very, very frightening for all people involved. And if you go into A&E at 2 a.m, say, in my case, if you went into Cork A&E or Tralee A&E or indeed in Tipperary or in Sligo, wherever it is, if you present to A&E at 2 a.m, the likelihood of a consultant psychiatrist being on duty and on the premises at that time isn't always great. So what we have now is an online facility where potentially like a blood pressure cart could be rolled up inside the A&E or wheeled in, and with the flick of a switch, a psychiatrist is available to meet the presenting person, to assess them, to diagnose, to prescribe, and even to admit if necessary. And all of those actions, it takes a requirement of a consultant psychiatrist, and they will provide clinical governance to the treating doctors on site. I mean, the person isn't going to be on their own, they're going to be in the presence of non-consultant hospital doctors who will be on duty in the hospital, and indeed some nursing staff and psychiatric trained nurses, and they will get guidance and governance from the consultant psychiatrist, who is acting remotely, so can be in this hub in Roscommon, in Roscrea, and could be providing psychiatry. What we have at the moment is, unfortunately, in some instances, in too many instances, you have a situation where the person presenting to an A&E at 2 a.m. has to wait perhaps until 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. until a consultant psychiatrist comes on site and on duty. And that's a very, very stressful 5 or 6 hour wait for the person themselves, for the family member or friend who's with them, or indeed for some of the other people and, you know, some of the staff there as well. So that's one level of it. That's one example of it. I heard a consultant psychiatrist talk recently about there are only 4 inpatient units for young people in the country. There's 2 in Dublin, 1 in Galway, and 1 in Cork. And I suppose the one in Cork is full. You may have somebody from Kerry needs to be admitted to an inpatient psychiatric unit, a young person, and they may have to go to Galway where there's a vacancy. Well, then in that case, the consultant psychiatrist again has to travel from Galway down to Kerry to assess the young person before deeming them suitable to be admitted to the inpatient unit, whereas now that assessment could be carried on online, where typically it would have taken a full day of a consultant's time to do one single assessment, to travel from Galway to Kerry. If you do it online, it can be done within 1 hour. And, you know, that consultant psychiatrist can do so much more work. So that was one of the developments in the Castlerea premises. We also have opened there a day hospital for CAMS, for young people, and we also have a day hospital there for psychiatry of later life. and the move to the model of day hospitals is a very positive move away from a reliance on inpatient care 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. A lot of people, if they could access the necessary psychiatry, psychology and talking therapies and assistance during the day in a day hospital, can go home and spend the night with their families in their own home, which obviously is much more preferable than having to be admitted to a psychiatric unit.
It's a good investment in the town, isn't it, in Castlerea, having a day hospital?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a very positive development for the people in that area to have access to a day hospital. This was the Rosalie unit. It was a former psychiatric unit for older people. And over time, it became an obsolete model, really, because the people got much older who were living there, the residents there, and their care needs became more geriatric than psychiatric. And they needed to be, with professional staff who were trained in geriatrics to care for their needs. So some of them were moved on to nursing homes, and the unit became empty. And there was a commitment I gave to ensure that it would continue to play a part into the future development of services in that area.
Okay, to move on to talk more about the new mental health strategy sharing division, can you tell us what is different about this strategy compared to the last strategy, A Vision for Change?
Yeah, the last strategy, national strategy, was in 2006, and it lasted up to this present day. And effectively, that was, looking back at it now, was more of a prescriptive model. In other words, it went along the lines of, for every 100,000 population in the country, you need to have X amount of consultant psychiatrists, you need to have X amount of psychologists, X amount of, the various different disciplines represented. And it set ambitious targets, but it was very prescriptive by its nature. Whereas the new mental health policy that we launched yesterday, Sharing the Vision, a mental health policy for everyone, which is for the next 10 years, is much more focused on recovery and outcomes. So in other words, instead of measuring inputs and how much we're putting into the system and how many of everything we're putting into the system, it actually is moving the focus more towards looking at what is coming out of the system, what are we getting for the services that we're providing, what sort of outcomes are we achieving, how do we measure those outcomes, who's going to measure them, who's going to monitor it, who's going to evaluate it, and what learnings are coming from each and every one of these. So it's a more ambitious approach towards mental health. I think the first approach was probably easier to draft, to be fair, because it just was prescriptive. In an ideal world, you should have X, Y, and Z inputs into the service, whereas I think this is more ambitious when it actually holds to account the outputs and the results, and is more recovery focused. Because, for example, if you look at inpatient beds, and people obviously we need more and more inpatient beds, but the reality is back in the 1960s, we had over 20,000 inpatient psychiatric beds in Ireland, over 20,000. Today there are fewer than 8,000, 1,000 psychiatric beds in Ireland. People say that's not enough, and yes, you can make that argument, and we could build another 500 beds, and I'm sure there's a potential to fill each of those beds. Or we can look at a more challenging approach, to look at the people who are in psychiatric units. Do they absolutely need to be in there? Are we ensuring that they're recovery focused, that they're orientated towards people coming out, not going into a psychiatric unit and staying there for the rest of their lives? So what recovery colleges have we established? How are they working out? What successes are they having, and learning from that and trying to implement more of that. That's more ambitious, it's tougher, and it's more arduous, but it is the right thing to do, is to be moving away from a reliance on the same approach has been taken to the whole mental health space, where a consultant psychiatry, as I said, is a very specialist service, and too often all of the media narrative and all the political narrative can be focused on that very specific end, which is psychiatry, when it could be more appropriately, made people aware that there are, for example, a young person with ongoing stress and anxiety often is typically referred into the CAMS service, which is led by psychiatry. But in a lot of cases, the young person could do just as well if they were, directed towards a talking therapy or a psychology service, which would be a lesser level of intervention. It would avoid the need for medication in some cases, and can work. It's not appropriate in all cases, and it's not the answer to every young person's needs, and you will always have a need for psychiatry. But I think we can challenge ourselves as a society on our dependence on psychiatry. And if you continue to build more and more and more and more psychiatric services, well, then the tendency is that you will have a build and they will come a model that will self-perpetuate. So I think it is more ambitious to actually look at more preventative, proactive, because we do know that a lot of mental health issues escalate, and what can start out as a stress, as an anxiety, as an irrational fear and so on, can actually escalate up if it's left undetected, unobserved, untreated, to a more serious and indeed become a mental illness, which would require psychiatric input.
Okay, I have a couple of questions, more questions on the strategy. I've done loads of interviews over the last few years on addiction services in Ireland, and including alcohol addiction, and I've done interviews with Carol Moore from Dual Diagnosis Ireland. The level and evaluation of addiction and dual diagnosis services we have in Ireland, I have been told, are thoroughly inadequate. Jim, is this situation going to change at all?
Yeah, there are 4 central pillars to the policy that was launched yesterday. The first one is prevention, more appropriate early intervention and awareness of it, promotion of mental well-being and mental health. That's the first. The second one is access, which I'll come back to later on, which is social access. The third one is social inclusion. And the fourth one then is monitoring and evaluating and assessing how we do in continuous improvement. But the third one there is social inclusion, which is very much looking at a more holistic approach to a person's issues. So very often when you have an addiction issue, and I'm not an expert now, I'm not a clinical person, and a clinical person will be much better to answer a question like this. But when you have an addiction issue, it can be multifaceted. There can be a number, and you've talked about dual diagnosis there, where there is, there's a doubling, if you like, of challenges to be dealt with. And oftentimes in it, if you look to the person's background, they could be a member of an ethnic minority, there could be a housing issue there, they could have, social issues, family, disengagement from family, or from their social network. So what the third pillar is very much is to look at the whole person and to treat the whole person and look at all the supports around that person, not just treating in isolation the mental health issues such as addiction. So what that involves is taking all of the partners and all of the government agencies and all of the various statutory agencies, taking a collective approach to dealing with somebody. So, for example, if somebody has chronic alcoholism, and if they're living on the street as a result of that, which do you treat? Do you just treat the alcoholism in isolation? Or what this strategy would say is you need to take the whole person and you need to look at all of the issues affecting this person, and you need to work towards providing a home. I mean, that's the model in Canada, where it's housing first, and make sure that everybody has a home first before you start to treat, because as long as they don't have a home or whatever the underlying issue is.
Okay, we're into the second half of the interview now, and I'll come back to you in a few minutes talking about implementation of the strategy. There are some other very good ideas mentioned in the strategy, I think, like crises, cafes and government wellbeing indicators. And I know now for the last few months there's a phone number people can ring to find out advice and more about their nearest mental health services. Do you want to say anything about any of those policies?
Yeah, as I said, service access is one of the key. Again, there's only 4 pillars to it. Service access, I've just spoke about service inclusion, but service access, and what that is effectively is ensuring that people, A, are aware of the services that are out there, and B, know how to get to them. And how do we improve that? And this document is very strong on that, on improving access to services and awareness. So one of the things we have done in tandem with the development of this policy is a single mental health phone line was established, because I've often made the point that if you were in the middle of a mental crisis or a mental, issue and challenge, and you said to yourself, who do you call? It's very, very hard to know. Is it Aware? Is it Alone? Is it Theatre House? Is it Jigsaw? Is it, all the different groups that are there, and you're struggling in your mind to know, who should I call? So there is one number, which is 1-800-111-888. That's 1-800-111-888. It's a free phone number. It will take you to a professional person in the National Ambulance Centre in Dublin who will answer your call, who is trained in dealing and appropriately signposting people for mental health services. They have in front of them a list of well in excess of 1,000 different services, the length and breadth of the country, and they will appropriately direct you to the most, the likely successful outcome you can have by going to this particular service in your area and how to make contact with that service, as opposed to you having to Google and all of that. So that is accompanied by a website, which is yourmentalhealth.ie, which again, you can type in your issue, type in where in the country you are, and it will give you the list of services in your area to support, whether it's addiction, whether it's anxiety, whether it's stress, whether it's an eating disorder, or whatever particular challenge, whether it's suicidal ideation, they will appropriately refer you. That's a very significant development in the whole accessing of services. We have further complemented that in the past week with a text service, which is 50808. And again, I always ask people to put these numbers into their phone if they think of it in the here and now, because it's handy to have it in the phone for yourself or for somebody else when the need will arise. So 50808 is a free 24-hour, 7-day-a-week text service where you can text hello and somebody will text you back and ask how are you doing, and you can have a conversation with that person. And if you require help or assistance or feeling down, they will chat you through that. And they will also, again, can direct you to more appropriate services if the need arises. So there are three, the yourmentalhealth.ie, 1-800-111-888, or 50808 are three very good resources to direct and signpost people towards the most appropriate service.
Okay, Jim, have Micheál Martin and or Leo Varadkar told you or indicated to you that they are going to allocate the necessary funding for mental health services in Ireland over the lifetime of the next government?
I haven't sought that commitment, and I suppose I aren't in a position at this point in time until such time as we have a government, which hopefully will happen in the next week or 10 days. And if that happens, if a government is formed, well, then at that stage, governments are going to have to make decisions. There's a budget coming very, very fast in October. And that's the stage where the allocation to mental health. But just on the issue of funding, and the point I make often is funding in of itself is necessary, of course. More funding in of itself is desirable. But, you could double the amount of funding to the mental health service tomorrow. But as long as you're not guaranteed that you're getting outcomes and recovery-focused results, well then, you have to look at how good and how great that would be. So the point I make to people is that it's not the ideal yardstick to use. In other words, any government that gives a commitment, for example, to double the amount of funding to mental health tomorrow, I'm not sure that would improve mental health. It certainly wouldn't double the effect of the mental health services that are there or the benefit of them. It's not an ideal yardstick. Of course, funding is necessary, but what we do. For example, what I just said to you there about a consultant psychiatrist who has to assess somebody in Kerry, and they're based in Galway. And that is a reality because there are only 4 inpatient units for young people, 2 in Dublin, 1 in Cork, 1 in Galway. So if somebody had to travel to Kerry to assess, it's an entire day's work for a consultant psychiatrist. If that consultant psychiatrist can do it online, and this consultant psychiatrist has told me this, and I appreciate that consultant psychiatrist knows best, that they can do that online and do it within an hour, which leaves another 7 or how many ever hours left in the day to see so many more people. So we also have to continually look at the results we are getting, and that's why my drive over the time for the 3-year period that I've been minister has been very much focused on how we do what we do and better ways of doing it. And on that, a key focus of mine has been the delivery of online mental health services, digital services, which are not a replacement for face-to-face services, but they are an enhancement to accompany the delivery of it and to enhance the delivery. In other words, if you're sitting at home at 8 o'clock in the evening and you're feeling really in a bad place, the idea that you will get up in the morning, make a phone call to see a therapist somewhere in the city, which might be 30 kilometres away from you, and get an appointment 3 days later and so on, is very daunting, is very difficult to do, and can sometimes be a barrier to accessing that service. Whereas if somebody can actually reach out online and type in and get access to a counsellor at 9 o'clock in the evening, and there's somebody on the other end of the screen who's a trained professional, so you can access them here and now, immediately, when and where you want, how you want, and why you want, and there's an anonymous element to it if you so wish. Well, that's a far, far better utilisation of that and delivery of the service. So I think online adds a lot of potential. It's not the panacea for all things, but it does offer enormous potential to greatly enhance the delivery of mental health services.
Okay, Jim, we haven't got much time left. We could talk about these issues for hours. You mentioned a few minutes ago the Department of Health believes in holistic treatments. I'm not sure if this is mentioned in the strategy, but would you be in favour of there being a wider range of more complementary therapies available for people to use in mental health services?
Yeah, I am very much down, and I've always been a proponent of it in my time, is to make more widely available and it'll create awareness of other treatment pathways for people, such as talking therapies and psychology. I think they play a very, very powerful role in people's mental well-being, in promoting awareness of mental well-being and preventing escalation up to more serious mental illness. So there's a difference between mental health and mental illness. And when you escalate up into mental illness sphere, well, then you are going to need the specialist services in all likelihood. But, people can, if they reach out earlier to talking therapies and to psychology and engage with those services at an earlier time, they can prevent that escalation. So I'd be very, very much supportive of that. And that is one of the 4 pillars of the strategy we launched yesterday. It is 25% of the document, if you like, which is prevention, promotion, and early intervention.
And the thing about complementary therapies is, one thing about them is there is a big range option there to use. And I was talking to Addiction Response in Crumlin there a few weeks ago, and they do Reiki amongst other things there, and I can do Reiki as well myself. And Reiki's had a huge positive impact on me, and I know in the NHS in the UK, for example, it's actually an option. You can get Reiki done on you if you want. I'd love to see. I'm not sure if you have an opinion on Reiki itself on its own, do you?
Well, I mean, I prefer just to address it in the broader context. I'm not a clinician. I don't have any expertise in the medical world, I don't have any expertise in the treatment pathways. It's not really my area to comment or to pass any. Neither would I just say the whole idea of complementary therapies to me is a more proactive approach to dealing with mental health and reaching out to that. Each individual therapy has its own merits, and that's for a clinician and for personal GP perhaps to give them advice on what would be the most appropriate pathway for somebody to engage in.
Okay, Jim, finish up with anything else you want to tell our listeners before you go?
Sorry?
Is there anything else you want to tell our listeners before you go?
Sorry, Darren, thank you. Yeah. Look, I suppose, awareness is key, and I do think if people would please just save those numbers in their phone, it really would be a very productive day's work, because, like all of us, we don't know what's around the next corner for ourselves or for our loved ones and those around us, and it may not be ourselves might benefit, but it might be somebody in your circle who you will be talking to sometime. And if you have the number 1-800-111-888 in your phone there and now to give to somebody, that could be the difference between life and death. It could be the difference between a very, very positive experience for somebody and a very negative experience. It can be life-changing. So 1-800-111-888 or text 50808. Those 2 numbers, put them in your phone, and I think that would be a very, very positive step.
Fiona, lear me leat a Raidió an bhí se caite faoi do rol nua mar Príomhfheidhmeanach an aglaach mental health reform. Tá nuacht waith a gcuin ó hine le an teachtain seo, maidir le tro agus beidir cór chuig a Roinn Sláinte ghuiiteanna nach bhfuil an féideart injin dún cadé an Johnnyog seo?
Hiken, so Darren, in a way, Howard mar heol an tara Jim Daly agus an tara Simon Harris, Beartas Roinn Sláinte intinne do Aire, Beartas dar anim Comhfhís, Beartas Meabhairshláinte do Chách. Beartas an tafada tom ta haya Kate Bihilena agus Mijin Shaw in mental health reform gal feed focal at a woman couldn't much faster more of an Beartas it came tower to hun a hinch go services for changing and what you bring in aiding agus Tisha mar bhór me le tomul faoin tisha ceireadh bliain ó chríní an Beartas dearna agus tisha ceireadh bliain ó corú Beartas úr an núl in éirin agus tá chuid mhóradí mai hios tí sa Beartas úr ceiréadh chuir mid fáistir an fís agus nó bhuana atá locha má tan bhéim ar an Beartas tisha ar an dúnra go déanamh agus ar an duine iad hain. As tá sin an táhacht go bhfuil an bhéimean an duine Arcanta freisin na rudí éagsúla a chuann sa staach Sláinte intinne agus tuisina sa táhailta agus cinan nó bhaige a bhí sa plán dearna inaró plán féimine a bhí nu agus tesin nu sa Beartas seo agus tá grúpa le bh choú nu fasta le déna cinse gohfuil an Beartas gáil sa trá ceart agus gohfuil an réaltas agus an na HSE choú nu le so scial mai hiúné.
Tá lán agah go háirthe as béle déanta gom le agrachtaí ar nós ach Call Action Ireland agus Dual Diagnosis Ireland a Roinn Sláinte nuas a Comhfhís an aspa mór aspa servicí ag déile daoine le feiban le andúil in éireann agus cean goilte go mór le ceist an mhórfií andúil in éire tá ceist mhórfií sheirbhísí a bhhain le dhiaidh de agus an mór servicí aspa dóibh siúd a míon diagnosis orthú. An bhfuil éon airú sa scéal modulation servicí seo a Fiona?
Tá scéal mai modulation na servicí sin cidan na bhaige bhí sa Beartas dearna na róhan an bhéim ar an diagnosis haró sé tí sa Beartas dearna agus chuirmid fáilte go bhfuil te chud bhór bhéim ar an áhar sin sa Beartas úr agus rud a dúrann sé a rís go bacadí an duine na háir go bhí chearta dúní a na hónaí le andúla go bhfuil siad san ábalta na servicí éil sa phobal servicí ar Roinn Sláinte intinne mar go tá ruice mór ag dúní le andúla na bhfuil siad ábalta na stáilta na servicí éil sa phobal agus na siad ábalta na stáilta mar man chuide cearta éil a taigí hatú agus tá neart bhil sa Beartas úra i caintfuí sin agus tá sulagain go gorann siad go gorann rialtas an nu le na mínas na blianta tá máróin.
Bhí an tuairisceir drive timer ortaí Raidió hain in éifinn straitéis go maiid sílim agus taise gom gur thula tú An 18 tú leis an méid a bhí le rá ag an Dr. Ciarán Mór ar an leir Fiona maidir leis an text féin sa straitéis a bheith deachar le léamh agus comáid sin an aspa eolais an faoin muoinú le high servicí nua?
Bhí me géisteach leis cinse darin agus those are tan document of the father, ta could word always is video, agus kaimage rama waku la urk o hiu kendall the redivi midget re ne was homage falsche more of an Beartas Dutch mid basta the wedge o hiu an aspa always we knew shin read it to junior kish we faster agus kin a scotion o hiu Canada political tishonta tawa tishin kendall no wiki. Well, a virtually can the wiki small of the Lishan Beartas during na rokulo Canada political on because more mental health foreign to Virginia Kirkish it in hid ta commission for me and super junior at a super junior event too. I guess to make you faster ref we knew to Shafian to tower to gom mí leis an plán seo. Ní hiigling ridí a ára muna bhfuil muoinú le churanú chun an ára sinna dhéarna. Mar sin cinnead an Chách weide me dinne ré leis an réaltas úr bhí cé a go le bhm go gaithfidh siad an Canadart a thuirtá Sláinte intéis caiithfidh muoinú in nu fuaisi.
Agus a caint fin rialtas nua an bhfuil sibh a mental health reform sásta leis an méid a dúirt Fine Gael Fianna Fáil agus an Quaintas Glaston na gcuid stréach chláir rialtas a fógraíoch le déanaí Module Sláinte intinne?
Sé We has erin le cal se dracht querialtus guru couple lechna on Sláinte agus gedurche gasalia gewolshed galla har nu an Beartas nua sha as vision moile dekel agus vi nart Raidió is se document faste it is clear no hokun tareshkaji aige gejal agus ni hugshid ein muinu a rudeby a tishonta tawata gwul in Canada sin agus gwul in taigid a muinu sin mar monowol ni few rudeby a testi se dracht chweriltas.
Okay, Fiona Coyle dro an aglef or walain rud ra got faoin brose short module an straitéis sna seachtaí no mína a blianta támachrán a cór ar éisteoir bhar na fao.
Yeah, mar rud Virginia fanna leis an gohfuil an grúpa cinálga an grúpa tá lochas sa Beartas a galibh a ggurc ar an plán féimine go mé sin chuthnú de gastas hiclé. Tá má meas go bhfuil muidir líg ó COVID cé go táhairta te ar Sláinte intinne agus te se táhairta má daine bí a géiste mu te caiint le flitiar le Jenny Kinchil go inchidí fós go táhairta te sé Canada support da Meabhairshláinte sna míon agus na blianta tá mar Roinn agus da duine bí tá cuairte níos mó áhais tá meidir na man social to go léir mental health reform agus tá idirlín agin fasta www.complementarytherapies.ie.
Agus tá ever phone in ish le an Roinn Sláinte nó service éigen nach bhfuil ever phone ceir óra sa lá ina féidir text nó lecha chuir agus dheoidh tú eolais agus eolais áirithe agus eolais freisin faoi na service Sláinte intinne is congrach dit nach bhfuil níos am cén ever atá annach tá sé sin an freisin nach bhfuil?
So with the my heol the charting so heol an HSD agus sprung out text quick and nod heart agus do to so the tech service then you be it ag marug then just a kindlish na ag could you pick up a talk text go quick nod your heart
agus is féidir iwwer eile a úsáid chun caintear an bhán freisin. Okay.